Good evening, ladies. Welcome to our discussion about Poland, about the situation in Poland, but not only about the situation like it is today in 2020. We also want to discuss what is it to live in Poland as a young student and what changed during the last 20 years in Poland. And I am very honored that I have two guests with a Polish background. And when I say a Polish background, I mean that they actually usually live in Poland, but they are studying abroad now. So they are not immigrants in Vienna with a Polish background because they have quite a distance to their parents' home. No, we have the real deal here tonight. And I'm very glad to announce Claudia and Natalia. And please introduce yourself.
Claudia.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you, Dietmar, for the invitation, and thank you for having me. My name is Claudia Zygmunt, and I'm a Polish lawyer. For the last few years, I've worked for human rights-oriented NGOs in Poland. And right now I'm pursuing my LLM in human rights here in Vienna. And I also work as a research assistant in the topic much related to our topic today, because the topic is women in constitutionalism. So I think we can touch up on that.
Wow, that's very impressive. So yes, well, my name is Natalia. I'm currently living in the UK. I've been living in the UK for almost 4 years now. I was born in Warsaw, born and raised in Warsaw. My undergraduate degree was in international relations and global studies. I'm currently gaining a master's degree in media communications and international journalism. I think I'm not exactly professionally involved with the protests. However, I have been involved in them ever since I was in high school, ever since I got fined by the police, ever since I ended up accidentally on BBC with a middle finger on the main page. So yes, I am deeply, hardly involved in what's happening in Poland right now.
So when I mentioned the Polish community in Vienna, and I talked to a couple of people here, and I talked about our discussion, and they said that they are very happy that you are going to join us, and because they refuse to speak too much about it, because they are actually, mostly of them were born in Vienna also, and they sent their warm support also to Poland. I do not want to forget to mention this. And that brings me to my first question. If we are talking about 2020, if we are talking about what happened in October, November, do you think it is different than what you experienced before when you were protesting like 5 years before?
It is completely different. The protest has been lasting for, I think, exactly 38 or 39 days now. The last time I was protesting, those were single protests with, I don't know, I would say it was a 2-day protest. And then after a few months, there was another one. It's been lasting for more than a month now. The police have been getting aggressive. The people have been getting aggressive as well. It's just a completely different experience. And the fact that I cannot be there, even if it was just for the case of getting pepper spray in my eyes, it's absolutely raging. So yeah, it is a great event.
Claudia, if you compare the protests, let's say also with what's happening 5 years before or 2 or 3 years before, and if you compare the urban areas to the countryside, do you see differences?
I would say I see a difference in the power of the crowd. Like when we were protesting in 2017 against the changes in the judiciary, then we could hear also from the rural territories, but also from the supporters of the government, that this is the problem of some kind of elites, and this is where the populism in Poland comes up. So that wasn't, many people didn't feel that this is related to their daily life, but I feel like right now when there are people on the streets, they are actually angry, and they feel that these changes that are happening right now, they actually can have impact on their lives or the lives of their sisters, mothers, or wives. So here I see the difference. And between the urban and rural territories in Poland, we know that there is this big diversification when it comes to the election results, but I would say that we could observe mass protest all over the country, not only in the big cities.
Could you give us a brief summary of what actually people are protesting about? Because you mentioned the judiciary, and what's the change between what we saw a couple of years before, yeah, and what we are facing now in the topic of abortion?
Yes, the protest in 2017 regarded the changes in judiciary. This mass amendment to the judiciary law started from the Constitutional Tribunal, from the exchange of the compositions of Constitutional Tribunal, then the Supreme Court, the very doubtly lawfulness of the appointment of the president of the Supreme Court, and creation of 2 new chambers, including a disciplinary chamber, which is used right now as a tool to undermine the independence of judiciary, which also European Court of Justice had a judgment on this, as well as Venice Commission. So yeah, these are like massive changes that happened over last years in the judiciary system in Poland, and now basically what happened in 2020 is the result of these changes. So this is why the Constitutional Tribunal could make such a decision in such a time in the middle of the pandemic. So yeah, maybe Natalia, you would like to add something?
See, first of all, actually, I mean, I didn't hear your question just because all of a sudden my internet stopped working.
So what the recent developments, yeah, according to the judiciary and what we are facing now with the abortion law, with the new abortion law, what are the changes between, I mean, it was already a very strict law and now it's even worse according to self-determination, etc.
Yeah, well, as Claudia said, it all started with the problems with judiciary system. And at this moment, I feel like it's not exactly just about the abortion law. It's about the fact that people are just tired of all the protests, all that's happening right now. As I said, it's not about women's rights. It's about the whole country's rights, really. So yeah.
So you
both, maybe coming back to the.
No, please finish. Please finish.
Yes, I would just like to make this remark that right now the legal situation when it comes to the abortion law in Poland, it's not actually different from the one we had before the judgment, which means before the October 22, because according to the Polish constitution, the tribunal's judgment enters into force only upon the publication of the judgment in the official journals, not its announcement in the courtroom. And Prime Minister didn't publish the judgment yet.
There is one thing I figured out for myself. I mean, I have been to Poland a lot of times, and what I learned there, that somehow, in my opinion, that civil society is quite awake if you compare it to countries like Russia or Belarus. I mean, in Belarus, there's a huge development now, but people are fighting against an actual dictatorship. Yeah? But on the other hand, Poland is not like Western European countries. So it seems it's somehow in the middle. And I think it's very impressive to see civil society now. You see the pictures of streets full with people protesting for human rights, rule of law, etc. And do you think that in which direction is Poland actually heading right now? Is it maybe just a little struggling before there is a full democracy, or is it actually a development facing back to the communist era system of maybe with a Catholic influence, but more a strict authoritarian regime? What is your prediction?
Maybe I will start because if you read the theory of populism, you can see that basically Polish government acts according to it. It might be basically a textbook of populism. So that's the first remark. And then there is this term of illiberal democracy, and I think this is actually the direction where as a country we are going. So we keep the framework of democracy. We do have elections, and basically the ruling party has the mandate to govern and also have quite big support among the citizens. But on the other hand, within this framework of the democracy, there are many abuse of powers, which we can see in many spheres of the life.
See, funnily enough, even though we do have democracy, I noticed that there was a lot of fear, especially during the presidential elections. A lot of my friends and their parents and their grandparents, when going to the elections, they would take a candle with them just so as to make sure that the elections aren't falsified. And it's not, I just feel like even though we do have democracy, people fear that there is none. Like, we don't know if the elections were falsified or not. I mean, I'm not saying they were. I'm just saying that just the fact that people are scared that they would be is a sign that there is something wrong. I mean, hopefully we're not heading into the direction where people will be afraid of their own country, of their own government. But that's how it is now.
But if you're talking about the young generation like you, many of them go abroad, some of them stay abroad. Do you think that this phenomenon is also a problem, that the more conservative people maybe, or maybe less democratic or less civil society oriented, stay in Poland, and the other ones are actually, I do not like to use the word fleeing, but are going to other countries, and this could also influence the political future of the country?
See, personally, I haven't met anyone that was actually fleeing. My friends that decided to study abroad, they didn't do it because they were running away from Poland, not at all. They did it because they had the option to do it, and they were curious about what the world has to offer. I mean, the world is our oyster. So I didn't experience anyone trying to escape Poland. I would never think of myself as someone who was trying to escape her own country. I love Poland, but I'm curious about what there is that I still haven't explored yet. So that's just my experience, really.
Yeah, I would totally back up Natalia with this, because even looking at my friends, most of my friends after graduation, but they are not thinking about leaving Poland right now. Like, basically the economic growth in Poland was quite well before the pandemic, and the standards of life was getting higher and higher. So basically the life in Poland, we enjoyed living in Poland. And many of my friends, including me, we just want to contribute to our country. Yeah, so I also wouldn't say that people are flying, but on the other side, I'm thinking about members of the minorities, and then I can imagine that in this regard, living in Poland have to be extremely hard right now.
You mentioned the economic growth of the last decades, and it was quite impressive. So Poland is one of the successful examples actually of EU membership. Yeah? joined in 2004, if I remember correctly. And there is also, if you take a look at the polls or if you take a look at the surveys, there's a huge majority supporting the membership in the European Union. But also there is, on the other hand, the PiS party, there is a huge EU skepticism within the policy, especially regarding the rule of law, etc. How do you explain this kind of on one hand support of the EU membership, on the other hand skepticism towards the EU policy regarding rule of law? Claudia.
Sorry, I don't know which one of us you were asking. I think I would come back again to the problem of populism in Poland, because it doesn't matter what kind of support PiS party has. They present themselves as morally right, like the only morally correct choice. So that's why they also present themselves as a voice of majority, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they represent the standpoint of the population, because as we can see from the polls, actually Poles are one of the most pro-European nation in the European Union. And I think we can see, also our parents can see the difference between the times in communism and the times after we joined European Union. And for me, I basically don't remember times when Poland wasn't a part of European Union. So for me, it would be just completely abstract vision.
Natalia?
I mean, same in my case. I cannot remember times when Poland wasn't in the EU. But it's actually quite funny that Euroscepticism is growing in Poland, because I believe Poland is the country that actually gained a lot from the EU. Like, we managed to rebuild because of the EU. So the argument that European Union is taking away our freedom, which is absolutely nonsense, is just not valid. So, yeah.
But I think it is very interesting, because you mentioned the same argument that a lot of Brexit people are mentioning, that the EU is taking away the freedom, and this is
that's what all Eurosceptics say. They say that EU is taking away their freedom, that EU is taking away a lot of money that they can spend on, in the case of the UK, on NHS, so National Health Service. But as Claudia said, there's a lot of populism involved. It's mainly populism right now when it comes to Euroscepticism. Yeah.
I have a side question, a spontaneous one, because you live in the UK right now, but you live in Scotland, yes? So you live in the pro-European part, yeah? So maybe it's quite different there, yeah? I support them, and I support the Remain community, because they are doing a good job, but as we saw, they did it too late, or they started too late. Did you what do Polish people think about Brexit in general? If you talk to them, if they are not living in let's say the United Kingdom or somewhere else, but actual Polish, yeah, the ones who are staying at home, do they have an opinion? Do they understand why Brexit happened, or do they think that they have something to do with it, or?
See, in case of other people that I know from Poland that live in Poland, I haven't really heard much of opinions on Brexit. But from what I heard about Scotland, actually, a lot of people from Poland who were working here, whose children would go to school here in Inverness, the moment the Brexit started being a thing, they just started escaping back to Poland.
Yeah.
So my friend, who's a teacher at primary school, said that each week there was a Polish child basically just disappearing from school because they were coming back to Poland. So I think that's quite an interesting case, and it actually shows a lot.
I also have a friend, he worked in Manchester, and he's from Poznan. I actually met him in Poznan, and then he went to Manchester. He worked there for about 2 or 3 years, and after Brexit, he decided to leave because everything was so uncertain, and he wanted to be secure, and he could not think about building a career in such a environment anymore. And also, you know, Manchester is very different in political ways. Yeah, so the Brexiteers were very loud, very hooliganish. I don't know if this word exists, but it explains what happened to him. And yeah.
See, I think that's the case for most of England, because, well, for the past 3 years, I've been living in Nottingham, and I've seen much more about Brexit in Nottingham compared to now that I'm in Scotland. For example, when I was in England, people wouldn't talk to me about Brexit, knowing that I am from Poland, I am from the EU, so maybe they just didn't want to risk an argument. But when I came to Scotland, so many Scottish people, when they met me, they wanted to make sure that I know that they support the EU, in a sense that they just want to know that it's not their fault that now I have to struggle, which is quite funny because they feel guilty for, I actually don't know what.
I have a very similar experience in that regard. What about you, Claudia? What are your Brexit experiences yet? What are the opinions that you heard from any side?
Oh yeah, I think when it comes to my Polish friends, I would say that no one was in favor of Brexit, actually. I think people after some time was tired of this topic because it was like never-ending story, but that was the only one thing. Also, when it comes to the polls in the United Kingdom, we should remember how huge scale is this, because I think there are like 2 million Polish people in the UK, so it's going to be a huge challenge very, very soon for them to adjust to the new rules, or like Natalia said, to come back to Poland. Yeah, and one more thought I have is that for us, like for Natalia and I, which, like we said, we don't remember the times where Poland was not a part of European Union. So I think that there is a risk that we take it for granted. Like we take democracy for granted, we take European Union for granted. And when it comes to Brexit, 5 years ago, probably no one from us would say that it's going to actually happen and that it might happen, but it did happen. So yeah, that's why, like you said, Dietmar, at the beginning, the civil society is a key here.
Yeah, because the civil society in the UK was quite, yeah, and this was a development that started, but after the Brexit referendum. So it was actually like they developed a cure, but the patient was already dead. Yeah? And this was very sad because now they are there, and this is this huge Remain movement, FBPE community, so follow back, pro Europe, and I met so many nice people, but it's too late. It's like they are congratulating us. They are, when we post as an association, when we post or tweet our content, and they are the most engaging community is the actual British anti-Brexit community, but it's too late. Yeah? And I have also to mention that the most aggressive people you find online are the pro-Brexit, the so-called Brexiteers. Yeah, they are very aggressive, and they attack you with a yeah, it's a terrible situation there, and I have no idea what kind of solution we will find. But as you both mentioned, there is no scenario now on the table that something like that could happen in Poland, because most of the people are in favor of the EU membership. But if we talk about EU skepticism, it's more about the policy and about very specific things. So you mentioned also the economic development of the last years, and we mentioned that civil society is stronger than many people here in the West believe. And what do you think can Polish civil society do to be more present in Western Europe? Because what I saw in the last years is, and what I think it's a huge problem, that people are talking about maybe removing Poland from the European Union, what I think would be a terrible idea because of the problems, because of the existing problems there. And what they also say, yeah, Poland is the same like Russia or Belarus or even worse, or some very wrong assumptions. And I think that we have there also a kind of communication problem, because the Polish people in, like, for instance, in Austria, they are not very connected to their home anymore, because many of them are already born here, or they integrate very much. Yeah? So it's all about the information basis is very small. Yeah. So actually, sometimes I have the experience that we do not communicate enough with Poland. I mean, I do, because I'm very often there, but usually we as a society in Austria or in other countries that are even more far away, they have a very dark picture of Poland. And despite all the problems, I think it's not deserved. So what do you think are the next steps to integrate even more from both sides, and to act more with each other? Claudia.
I was happy enough not to hear these arguments that they want to kick us out from the European Union. But what I think is that when our government is very Eurosceptic, what we can do, these are grassroots initiatives. Any kind of cooperation between NGOs, also like some education among young people, yeah, and some like public diplomacy, but conducted by non-governmental organizations or some civic society organizations, just to promote the picture of Poland, which is not only the ruling party, because we have to remember that any kind of government and any kind of regime is just temporary.
Natalia?
I mean, if I'm honest with you, yeah, I absolutely agree with Claudia. Like, we need to remember that it's not permanent. It will change eventually.
So, but how can we make people like you, like both of you, how could we make them more visible on a European level? I mean, if the party sends their MEPs to Brussels, so this is the one picture we have, then we have the policy. And what I think is the problem, especially about former Eastern European countries, former Eastern Bloc countries, that in our media, only bad news are actually news. So there is not much coverage of the good developments. Yeah, if you go to a panel discussion, if you go to the Institute for the Danube and Central European region, then you will discuss all the good things and the bad things. Yeah, but even we met because there are problems. Yeah? So this is why people get this picture. And yeah, I think that we need to reach out more, yeah, also from our side, yeah, because when I say I travel to Poland, then many times people have a very wrong impression about the people there, because they see only these conservative faces, and I think it's all about the Catholic dark ages society or something. And this is totally wrong, and not only in the big cities or Poznan or Warsaw, also in other cities it's different. Even in Białystok, yeah, I saw young people and alternative people.
Yeah, it's actually quite an intriguing case, because, as you said, people have this idea of Poland. They have an idea of, let's say, medieval ages happening in 21st century in Poland. But then each time I speak to foreign people who have managed to visit Poland, each time I hear how surprised they were to find out that apparently we're actually quite friendly and nice, and well, first of all, I mean, the biggest shock is always the fact that we speak English. So that's quite funny. Plus, yeah, we are a developed country, for God's sake. I mean, let's be honest, we built our country from scratches. So I suppose that is quite impressive for everyone who visits. But yeah, as you said, that's the idea people have of Poland, but it's not like that. It is not.
Thank you for your words. Yeah, this is exactly what was in my mind. Claudia?
Yeah, I think we proved them wrong. Even during this process that are happening right now, we are showing that no, we don't agree with this kind of politics, and that not everyone in Poland is in favor of conservative populistic regime. And I think we also proved it during the last presidential elections, because as you probably remember, there was like only 1% of difference. That was 51% against 49. So that the opposition in Poland is huge, even if it's divided when you look at the political stage. But actually, people, not majority of people, support this kind of policy. And the other remark to understand the situation in Poland, that this big support that Peace Party has is because they social policy, and not because majority of citizens support like human rights violations and stuff like this. So yeah, we have to like get a little bit deeper to understand why people actually vote for the ruling party.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting to talk to you, and thank you very much for taking the time to visit me and visit our association. We are happy to hear your opinions and your insights about Poland. We will follow the events very closely, and we will see what the next developments are. But what we totally learned today, and what we always need to repeat, that civil society is very active there, and there's very much developing, and we should not only take a look at the bad sides, because there are a lot of good developments during the last years. And thank you very much for joining our discussion today.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.